Well, so far we have discussed the differentiability of functions which are defined on some upper interval of the real line, but and also take values in the real line. That is, to put it in symbols, we have taken functions of this type AB to R. Okay. Now our idea is today to discuss a few things about what happens when we change this codomain. Okay, change this codomain to some x. Okay, code. So first of all, we would like to see what are the properties that are required for this codomain to satisfy, so as to make this whole concept of differentiability meaningful in that structure. So if you recall, let us, for example, suppose you take some x in AB. Okay. How do we, or when do we say that the function is differentiable at the point x? If we recall the definition, let us recall that we take this quotient f of x plus h minus f of x and then divided by h, and take the limit of this as h tends to 0. Okay. Now when f was going from AB to R, all this was fine. Okay, this makes sense. But suppose now these objects are coming from some other set x. Okay, then f of x plus h is a member of x, f of x is also a member of x. Then what is meant by subtracting those two? Okay, in an arbitrary set x. So obviously you cannot, this cannot be an arbitrary set x. There has to be some meaning of subtracting two elements. In other words, there has to be some algebraic structure in x. So addition or subtraction of two elements in that must make sense. Not only that, this is this 1 by h is a real number, so you are multiplying by that. Okay. So multiplying by a real number to an element of that also should have some meaning. Okay. And I think by now you would understand what I am coming to, since you are also doing the course on linear algebra simultaneously. What is required is that this must be a real vector space. Okay. That is, if you are given two elements in this, there should be some meaning of saying when the two elements, what is meaning by addition or subtraction of two elements, and what is meaning by multiplication of a real number and that. Okay. So the minimum thing that is required is that x must be a real vector space. Okay. That is clear. Okay. Now, but that is not enough. Okay. Suppose x is a real vector space, this quotient or this fraction makes sense. Okay. But we want something more. Okay. We want to take the limit of that as h goes to 0. Okay. Limit of that is, that means the whole process of taking limit also must be meaningful in that vector space. Okay. So you cannot take vectors, totally arbitrary vector space. Okay. On that vectors, and you have seen till now that you can talk of limits when it is a metric space. Okay. So what we need is that this should be a vector space, not only vector space, it should also be a metric space. Okay. And of course there should be some relationship between that metric and the algebraic operations. Okay. The most natural way to define these things is what is called a norm linear space. Okay. And so what is a norm linear space? It is a real vector space, and on that a function called norm is defined, and that function norm leads to a metric. Okay. That, so this norm is something like the absolute value in the real number. Okay. So in the case of real numbers, suppose we look at the suppose you take this function r to r, then what are the properties of this function? We know that absolute value of x is always bigger than or equal to 0, and it is equal to 0 if and only if x is equal to 0. So that is one thing. And second thing that you know is that absolute value of x plus y is less than or equal to absolute value of x plus absolute value of y for all x y in R. And third thing that you know is that if you take alpha times x, then this is absolute value of alpha times x is same as absolute value of alpha into absolute value of x. This is true for every x in R and also alpha in R. Okay. Now instead of R, suppose I replace this by some other vector space here. Okay. Then we take a function which goes from that x to R and satisfies all these properties. Okay. If that happens, that function is called a norm. Okay. That function is called a norm. So let us just look at that. So let us say X is a real vector space. Of course, we can define something similar in the complex vector space also, but we shall not go into that much of generality. Okay. X is a real vector space, and suppose we denote this function by norm. Okay. Norm is a function which goes from X to R. Okay. So we will say that a function from X to R is called a norm, on X. If it satisfies the properties which are similar to this. Okay, wherever I have written here absolute value, you replace that by norm. Okay. So first property is that norm of X is bigger than or equal to 0 for every X in X, and it is equal to 0 if and only if X is equal to 0. Okay. Second property is this, norm of X plus Y is less than or equal to norm of X plus norm of Y for every xy in X. This is a property which is usually described as triangular equality. Okay. And third property is norm of alpha times X is same as absolute value of alpha into norm of X. This happens for every X in X and every alpha in R. Okay. You might have wondered while writing the properties of this absolute value, why did I take alpha here, because I could have written this as simply y into X. Okay. But this is one of the convention followed is that if X is a vector space over some field R or C or whatever it is, you normally denote the elements of the vector space and underlying field by different sets of symbols. Okay. So for example, one can use the convention that will denote the elements in X which are called vectors as by the usual lowercase English letters X, Y, Z, etc., and elements in R which are called scalars by this letters alpha, Greek letters alpha, beta, etc. Okay. So a normed linear space is nothing but a vector space on which a norm is defined. Okay. So you can say a normed linear space is a pair. Okay. So a normed linear space is a pair X norm where X is a real vector space and norm is a norm on X. Okay. You can compare this definition with the definition of a metric space. Okay. Just as we define first what is meant by a metric. Given any set X, we define, of course it is not a function from X to R, it will be a function from X cross X to R, satisfying some properties similarly. Okay. That is called a metric on X, and a metric space is a pair X comma D if D is a metric on X. It is similar. Okay. Then what is the relationship between a normed linear space and a metric space? It is that a large number of metric spaces are basically normed linear spaces. Every normed linear space is a metric space. Okay. Of course converse is not true. There are, so except examples like, for example, you have discrete metric space that is not a norm linear space, because you can define discrete metric on any set, whereas norm you can talk of only on a vector space. But most useful examples of metric spaces are norm linear spaces. By the way, there can be different norms on the same vector space, okay, just as there can be different metrics on the same set, similarly there can be different norms on the same vector space. So as vector spaces those two will be the same, but as norm linear spaces those two will be different objects, okay. Suppose I take two different norms, okay, then there will be two different objects, okay. Now what is the relationship between a vector, that is vector space and this norm linear space and a metric space? As I said just now, every norm linear space is a metric space. How does that happen? For that you have to give a function which goes from x cross x to r starting from this norm, okay. And again, for example, what is this? Here you have the properties of the absolute value on the real line, okay. How is the metric on x, so called usual metric on x is defined? Distance between x and y is nothing but mod of x minus y. You do the same thing in arbitrary norm linear space. You define distance between x and y as norm of x minus y, okay. Distance between x and y as norm of x minus y, that is a metric, okay. So you can define d from x cross x to r by d of xy as norm x minus y. Okay. Then d is a metric on x. D is a metric on x, okay. Now how does one check that d is a metric on x? Let us, in fact it is fairly easy, we can quickly verify this, okay. For example, what is required for showing that d is a metric? First of all, dxy should be bigger than or equal to 0 for all x and y. Is it true? That follows from this first property here, okay. What is the next thing that you require? That is dxy is equal to 0 if and only if x equal to y, right, okay. Does it follow again? Suppose this is 0, then you must have x minus y equal to 0, which is same as in the x equal to y, okay. Again it follows, so that first property follows from here, okay, right. What is the other thing that you require? You require that d of xy should be same as d of yx, okay. What will be d of yx from this? Norm of y minus x. Is it same as norm of x minus y? And from what does it follow? It follows from here, okay. Suppose you take alpha is equal to minus 1, okay, then norm of minus x is same as norm of x, so that will give norm of x minus y is same as norm of y minus x, okay. And what is another thing required? Oh, you require that if you take for all x, y, z in x, you require that d of xz should be less than or equal to d of xy plus d of yz, right, okay. And this is what you call triangular inequality in metric spaces, right, okay. Now what is d of xz? This is the thing but norm of x minus z. What about this d of xy? Norm of x minus y, and this is norm of y minus z, okay. So can you say that norm of x minus z will be always less than or equal to norm of x minus y plus norm of y minus z, okay, right. And again, from what does it follow? This property here, okay. For example, you take a as let us say x minus y, b as y minus z, then x minus z will be a plus b, okay, and that will give this property here, okay. And that is why this is also called triangular inequality, okay, that is why this is also called triangular inequality, alright. So every norm leads to a metric, every norm leads to a metric. So this is d is a metric on x, and this metric is called induced by this norm, okay. it is called induced by this norm. D is a metric on X, D is said to be induced by this norm. Okay. Of course, here one may ask an obvious question, is suppose you are given a vector space and a metric on D, is every metric on a vector space induced by some norm? Okay. Again the answer is no. Okay. Again there are metrics which do not come from any other norms, because norms will have some more properties compared to the metric. It is possible to give the say when exactly a metric is induced by a norm, etc., but I think that discussion will take us too far away from what we basically want to discuss. Okay. So instead of getting into various properties of this norms and their relationship with metrics and properties of norm linear spaces, that is basically a subject of functional analysis. Okay. In functional analysis you learn norm linear spaces and operators on norm linear spaces. Okay. So coming back to what we want to discuss, we just have see some well known or usual examples with which we deal with. Okay. So one example is this, R with the usual absolute value, that is a norm. Okay. R with the usual absolute value, that is a norm. Okay. Similarly you know that absolute value can be defined on C also, C, right. If C is a complex number you can talk of what is meant by its absolute value. Okay. Okay. And that also satisfies all these properties. Okay. So that is also a norm. So C, and you can regard C also as a real vector space, you can regard C also as a real vector space. By the way, what we have defined is what is called a real norm linear space. Okay. Because if you are starting with a real vector space, so it is called a real norm linear space. If instead of real vector space, if we had started with a complex vector space, it would have been a complex norm linear space. Okay. But let us confine our attention to real norm linear spaces. Okay. Then what are the other obvious examples that you would have already seen? These spaces Rn. Okay. Spaces Rn with again with various norms on that we can define. Okay. We can define various norms on these spaces Rn. So let us just take one or two well known examples. Okay. For example, this is, so any element x, suppose I take x in Rn, then that is of the form x1 x2 xn, right. It is n tuple where x1 x2 xn are real numbers. Okay. So each xj is, so this belongs to Rn, that means each xj is in R. Okay. So how does one define norm? There are various ways. As I said, on the same vector space you can define various norms. Okay. So for example, one is called norm suffix 1. Okay. So norm suffix 1, that is nothing but you take mod x1 plus mod x2 plus, just take the sum of all the absolute values of all the n coordinates. So this is sigma mod xj, j going from 1 to n. Okay. In fact that is called one norm or sometimes called L1 norm. Okay. And similarly there is also what is called norm suffix infinity. Instead of taking the sum of the absolute values, you can take the maximum of the absolute values. Okay. Okay. That is called norm suffix infinity, that is maximum. Anyway there are n numbers, mod x1, mod x2, mod xn, you take the maximum of this, so that is maximum of mod xj. And another example of norm on Rn, which is most popularly used, it is called Euclidean norm. And that is denoted by this norm suffix 2. Okay, norm suffix 2, that is norm of x suffix 2. This is defined as follows. Okay. By the way, I suppose you are familiar with this symbol. Okay. this means whatever is there on the left side, okay, its definition is on the right of this symbol, okay. So this is sigma mod xj square, j going from 1 to n, and then take its square root, okay. So okay, similarly instead of taking this power 2 here, one can also take some other power between 1 and infinity, mod xj to the power p and then whole to the power 1 by p, that is called norm suffix p, okay, it is called, okay. So one can define any number of norms on a given vector space, and each of this norm will lead to a metric, okay. Each of this norm, for example this norm will lead to a metric, this norm will also lead to, for example if you look at the definition, if you look at dxy is nothing but norm of x minus y, okay. So suppose the corresponding metric if I call d1, then d1 xy will be sigma j going from 1 to n mod xj minus yj, right, okay. And similarly d suffix infinity, and here if I take say d suffix 2 of xy, that will be sigma j going from 1 to n mod xj minus yj whole square, and then this raised to 1 by 2, okay. And this is what is called the Euclidean distance, or Euclidean metric. And you can see the obvious reason for that, because when you take n is equal to 2 or 3, that is if you are looking at R2 or R3, this is the usual distance between the 2 points, okay. That is why the corresponding norm is called Euclidean norm and corresponding distance is called the Euclidean distance, okay. So for our discussion of this differentiation of the functions, let us confine ourselves to these two examples, either C with this absolute value or Rn with one of these norms, okay. Rn with, of course I have not proved that these functions define a norm, that requires some work, okay. For example you will have to verify that each of these functions satisfy all these properties. It is fairly easy to check in these cases, okay. For example suppose it is obvious that each of them is bigger than or equal to 0. In fact this is something that you should know even while discussing the metric. The real thing that needs verification is a triangle inequality, other properties are usually straightforward, okay. Once the definition of a distance is given, to verify that it is a metric, okay. Similarly in the case of norm, once a definition of a norm is given, to verify this and this is usually trivial, okay. For example if you look at here, norm of alpha times x, that will be nothing but sigma mod alpha xj, that mod alpha will come outside the summation sign, and that will be nothing but mod alpha times norm x. Similarly in case of the other norms, okay, real verification where some work is required is for this triangular inequality, okay. That is also fairly easy in case of these two, okay, because this will be mod xj plus yj, and you can say that mod xj plus yj is less than or equal to mod xj plus mod yj, and then separate in the sum, okay. But for something like this, okay, for example something like this, okay, to prove that the triangular inequality is satisfied, you have to go through some standard inequalities, okay. The proof that this satisfies this norm satisfies this triangular inequality requires what is called Cauchy-Schwarz inequality and also followed by Minkowski inequality, okay. Those are very well known inequalities, okay. We shall not go into the proofs of those, but using those inequalities one can show that the triangular inequality is satisfied by this function, okay. Okay, so now let us go back to our this thing. I take this f from AB to R, not AB to R, AB to x, where what is x? X is either, x can be, so see x can be in general any norm linear space, x can be in general any norm linear space for definition, but for most of the things, most of the practical purpose we can take x as either this C with this absolute value or Rn with any of those norms, let us say norm suffix 2 or 1 or infinity, any of those norms, but most frequently we deal with this norm because that is the one which coincides with the usual concept of distance in 2 and 3 dimensions, okay. So now let us take some x in AB, okay. Then now we can talk of f of, okay, instead of talking x plus h etc., let me just take any other number t which is also there in AB, okay. So I can say f of t minus f of x, you think of this t as x plus h, okay. So saying that h goes to 0 is basically same as saying t goes to x, okay. So I will take ft minus fx divided by t minus x, and now all this makes sense even though ft and fx are in this x, since x are one of these, okay, ft minus fx is well defined, that divided by t minus x is also well defined, and now we think of limit of this as t tends to x, okay, alright. And now limit is also, of course limit may or may not exist, okay, but the concept of limit is well defined because this is a metric space, okay. We can define in a usual way that suppose this limit is, of course this limit will also be some element in x, this limit will also be some element in x, okay. So whenever it exists, okay, and if it exists we can define it in the usual way, that is given epsilon there should exist some delta bigger than 0 etc., okay. That is if this limit exists we shall say that the function is differentiable at this point x, okay, and whatever is that limit that will be called a derivative of f at that point x, okay, and we shall denote that by as usual f prime x, okay. So this whole topic which I have discussed just now is called differentiation of vector valued functions, okay. This is called differentiation of vector valued functions. Remember this f prime x also will be an element in this space x, so either in C or Rn etc., okay. Okay. Now the question is fine, you can define what is meant by differentiation of these vector valued functions, but can you do something further about that, okay. Of course one can also ask one more question, why just replace this codomain by some other thing, why not think of replacing this also, okay. Yes, that can be done, but it will lead to some more complications, so we will not go into that, okay. That is something you may perhaps learn in your course in advanced calculus, okay, that is where you talk of differentiation of functions which are also defined in R2, R3 and things like that, okay. Anyway, this is little simpler and we shall discuss here, okay. So the question is what other things go through, obviously one can define what is meant by derivative, then whatever are the very routine things about the derivatives, those will go through even for this vector valued functions, okay. And what are those? For example, the theorems about the derivatives of the sums, okay. For example, if you take two functions f and g, okay, and suppose f and g both are differentiable at a point x, then f plus g is also differentiable, okay, and the value of the derivative is same as f prime x plus g prime x, okay. Product we cannot talk about in general, because there may be no product in this x, it is just a vector space, okay, it is just a vector space. So given two elements in x, the product may not be defined, but if you have some more additional structure on x you may talk about the product also, but let us not go into, certainly there is no meaning of talking about, of course you can talk of product here, product in C, because you have there is a definition of product of two complex numbers, but suppose you take two elements in Rn, you can talk of dot product etc., but not the usual product, okay, because the product will not be in Rn. And similarly you can talk of multiplying, but you can talk of multiplying by a real number to a function f, okay. For example, you can talk of the function alpha times f, okay, right, when alpha is a real number and its derivative also will be same as alpha times f prime x, okay. Then one can also see the following things, okay, we can for example let us first take this case C, okay. So when for example suppose f is a function from AB to C, okay, Now what does this mean? It means that fx is a complex number, right? It means that fx is a complex number and each complex number has a real and imaginary part, okay. So I can suppose I call the real part as say ux and imaginary part as vx, okay, right. Then for each x in AB you have defined these two real numbers, okay. In other words, every such complex valued function leads to two real valued functions u and v, both from AB to R. Similarly v from AB to R, okay, right. Now the obvious question here is, what is the obvious question? Suppose we know that f is differentiable at a point x, okay, can we say that this u and v are also differentiable, okay, right? And similarly what about the converse, okay, suppose we knew that u and v both are differentiable at a point x, can we say that f is differentiable, okay. Now again the answer to this question, both of these question is yes, okay, that is f is differentiable at x if and only if u and v both are differentiable at x. Let me just write that here, that is the result, f is differentiable at x if and only if u and v are differentiable at x. And how does one prove this? In fact I would say that this follows from the property of the absolute value function on the complex numbers, okay. And what is that property? That is, suppose you are given any complex number z and say z is equal to x plus iy, okay, then how are the absolute values of z and x related? Okay, in this case one can say exactly that mod z square is x square plus square root of x square plus y square, okay, but that is not something I am looking at, okay. What I want is the following, okay, that is, can we always say that mod x is less than or equal to mod z? This is something we can always say, okay. Can we also say that mod z is less than or equal to mod x plus mod y, okay, this is also something we can say. And similarly, okay, whether here you take mod x or mod y, both are less than or equal to mod z, okay. Now we just apply that to this fx is equal to ux plus I vx, okay. So suppose you write here fx is equal to ux plus I vx, then and similarly f of t will be ut plus I times vt. What is going to happen is this, okay. See, so ft minus fx, this will be same as suppose I write ft as ut plus I times vt and fx as ux plus I times vx. So this will be simply ut minus ux plus I times vt minus vx, and okay, suppose you divide this by t minus x and this I will write this I here, this also divide by t minus x, okay. Then let us say that suppose the limit of this exists, ut minus us divided by t minus x, suppose this exists, okay, then that we would call u prime at x, okay, and similarly if the limit exists, that we will call v prime at x, okay, but then the limit of this plus I times this should also exist, okay, and that is where we use this property. So what we can say is that suppose you take this fraction ft minus fx divided by t minus x, and let us say minus this u prime at x naught plus I times v prime at x naught, and suppose you take the absolute value of this, okay. Then use this mod z is less than or equal to mod x plus mod y. So remember f t minus that is u t minus u x divided by t minus x minus u prime x naught, that is the real part of this whole thing, right. Remember t minus x is a real number, t and x both are coming from this interval a b, okay, t and x, so t minus x is a real number, okay. So what one can say is this is less than or equal to ut minus ux divided by t minus x minus u prime x naught plus vt minus vx divided by t minus x minus v prime x naught, okay. Okay, and suppose we assume that this has a limit and its limit is u prime x naught, which is same as saying that this goes to 0 as t goes to x, right, and similarly this also goes to 0 as t goes to x, okay, and which is same as saying that because this left hand is less than or equal to that, this will also go to 0 as t goes to x, which is same as saying that the limit of this exists as t goes to x, and that limit is same as u prime x plus I times v prime x, okay. Okay. In a similar way you can prove about the converse also. What did we prove just now? That if u and v both are differentiable at a point x, okay, then f is differentiable at that point and its value is nothing but u prime x plus I times v prime x, okay. Conversely, suppose f is differentiable at a point x and suppose its derivative value is f prime x, okay, then real part of f prime x will be the derivative of u and imaginary part will be derivative of v, okay. In a similar way, and for that you will use this part of the inequality, okay, for that you will use this part of the inequality, because you can say that if you take only this much, that will be less than or equal to this, okay, that will be less than or equal to this, okay, alright. Now this is about the complex number, okay. Now with small modifications we can extend it to this Rn also, okay. So here what is involved, see in C there are only two things, real part and imaginary part, okay. But what we can say is, let me now take this situation, okay. Suppose this is slightly more involved in the sense there are more components, that is all, okay. Suppose you now take f from AB to Rn, okay. Now you take, let us say, x in AB, what will be fx? Fx will be a member of Rn, right, fx will be a member of Rn, right. Now if it is a member of Rn, what is Rn? Rn consists of n tuples of real numbers, okay. That means this fx will have n components, okay, fx will have n components, okay. So I can call, suppose I call the first component as f1x, so I can call this fx as follows, okay. I will call the first component as f1x, second component as f2x and the nth component as fnx, okay. So what is similar to this with the complex numbers? What is similarity? There you had only two real and here you have n components, okay. So what does this mean? That if you have one Rn valued functions, that corresponds to n real valued functions, okay. Is it clear? Suppose you have one function f which takes value from AB to Rn, corresponding to that you will have n such functions f1, f2, and each of those functions will go from AB to R, okay? So suppose I call each jth function here is fj, fj will be a function from AB to R, fj will be a function from AB to R, okay. And now coming back to differentiability, what will be the corresponding question and their answer here? what we would ask is the obvious thing. Suppose I knew that f is differentiable at a point x, okay, what can you say about each of these n functions, okay. So what we must expect is that each of these n functions are differentiable at that same point x, okay, and what will be the value of the derivative? It will be nothing but see f prime x naught, that will also have n components, okay, its first component will be the derivative of this, its second component will be the derivative of f2, etc., okay, that is what we should expect, okay. And that also can be proved again by essentially the same idea here, okay, that is just as we had seen that in case of if the complex number z is x plus iy, we wrote that mod x less than or equal to mod z and mod z less than or equal to mod x plus mod y, etc. Similarly for each, suppose you take x is equal to x1 x2 xn, okay, and you take any norm on this, okay, any of those norms, okay, then each of those norm has the following property, that if you look at mod xj, if you look at mod xj, then that is less than or equal to norm x, whatever norm you take, okay, whatever norm you take, and that is less than or equal to mod x1 plus mod x2 plus mod xn. This is true for every x in Rn, okay. Since I said that most often we will be discussing this L2 norm, let me write it for this, okay. And this is what we shall you will use to show that, show the following, okay, I will remove this. That is f is differentiable at x in AB if and only if each fj is differentiable at x in AB. That is whenever f is differentiable, okay, for all z, for all z equal to 1 to n, okay. That is if f is differentiable, f1 f2 fn are differentiable, and if f1 f2 fn are differentiable, then f is differentiable. Not only that, we can say something about the value of the derivative, okay. We can say that in this case, that is wherever, see there are two statements here and we are saying that this happens if and only if this happens, and whenever any one of these happens we also have this, and f prime at x is equal to f1 prime x, f2 prime x, etc. and finally fn prime x, okay, okay, all right. Similarly, one can say what happens if you take the composites of two functions, etc., okay. Now these are the things which go through in a similar way as in the case of functions going from AB to R, okay, but you should not be under the impression that everything goes through, okay. There are a few things which fail also, okay. There are a few things which are true in the case of functions like this f from AB to R, okay, and which are not true in the functions of this type, okay. And one of the most important in such properties is the mean value theorem, okay. Let me again recall what is, let us take the case of Lagrange's mean value theorem, okay. What did that say? That if you take the function from, okay, so this, okay, we said that function should be continuous in the closed interval AB and the differentiable in the open interval AB. Then what should happen? There should exist some point C in the interval AB such that fb minus fa that is equal to f prime C multiplied by b minus a, okay. So what I want to say is that such a thing does not happen in case of vector valued functions, okay. And what is the way of showing such a thing does not happen? There is only one way, that is you have to give an example, right? Okay. All right. So let us look at this function. Okay, I will take the interval as let us say f from, I will take the interval as 0 to 2 pi. Okay. Okay, and define f of x as, okay, I will just say e to the power I x, okay, or if you want to write in the usual form, write it as cos x plus I times sin x. Okay, all right. Okay, is this function continuous 0 to 2 pi? Is it also differentiable? We can use what we showed just now. Okay, it is a complex order function. If it is differentiable, if and only if its real and imaginary parts are differentiable, and real and imaginary part is nothing but cos x and sin. Those are well known differentiable functions, and we can also say what are the derivatives. Okay, okay, we can say that this is f prime x is same as derivative of this with respect to x, so that is minus sin x plus I times cos x. Okay, and you can see that that is same as this I times e to the power I x. Okay, all right. So it is continuous in the closed interval 0 to pi, open, in fact differentiable also everywhere. Okay, but we are only looking at this interval. Okay, all right. What is f at 0? F at 0 is 1. Okay. What is f at 2 pi? Okay, f at 2 pi is also 1. Okay, right. Okay. Now if mean value theorem were true, what should happen? What should happen is that there should exist some c in the open interval 0 to 2 pi such that f prime c is equal to 1. Okay, of course we are not asserting this, we are checking this statement whether this is true or false. Okay, that is the question. Oh sorry, f prime c is equal to 0, that is right, you are right. F prime c is equal to f 2 pi minus f 0, that is 0. Okay, what is f prime c? F prime c is equal to, either you write in this form I e to the power I c, or okay minus sin c plus I cos, okay, whichever way, and this has to be 0. Okay, is that possible? And what is the reason why it is not possible?
Alternate zeros.
Yes. Is it such a difficult question? What is the absolute value of f prime c? What is mod f prime c? 1. So can it be 0? Right? That is it, right? Okay. For no c, f prime c can be 0, right? For no c, f prime c can be 0. Okay, so we can say, so what we are saying is that in fact there exists no c for which, so this is a false statement. Okay, if you take any c, in fact you can say that if you take any c in the interval 0 to 2 pi, absolute value of f prime c is equal to 1. Okay, so it is not going to be 0 for anything. Is that clear? Okay. So mean value theorem is false. Okay, and hence since mean value theorem is false, whatever we have proved using mean value theorem, we cannot expect that to be true. Okay, for example something like in fact Lagrange's mean value theorem does not make sense at all, because it will involve dividing a function, one function by the other, so dividing one vector by the other. So forget about Lagrange, forget about Cauchy's mean value theorem. Okay, Lagrange's mean value theorem is false, Cauchy's mean value theorem does not make any sense. Okay, then we proved this L'Hopital's rules using mean value theorems, okay. Those also will not be true, okay. Those also will not be true for complex valued functions, right, okay. So whatever we have got for real valued functions using Lagrange's mean value theorem, okay, we cannot expect any of that to be true, okay, any of that to be true for vector valued functions, that means in particular complex valued functions and the functions in that take the values in Rn, okay. Fine, I think we will stop with that for today.